Across his 30-year run as host, Johnny Carson carefully curated guests who were both entertaining and professional. Most left with open invitations to return, yet a handful crossed boundaries Johnny never expected. Some mistreated his staff, others turned him into the punchline in ways that went too far. A small number even let things turn physical. What follows is a full breakdown of every guest Johnny Carson barred from The Tonight Show and the reasons behind each decision. Wayne Newton, the slap that ended it all. Wayne Newton finally lost his patience after enduring Carson's ongoing jokes about his masculinity, remarks he felt were damaging his carefully built Las Vegas persona. Before things escalated, he attempted to resolve the issue quietly by contacting NBC executives and asking that the jokes stop. When those efforts led nowhere, Newton took matters into his own hands and confronted Carson directly at his Burbank office. As Newton exited, Carson and Ed McMahon immediately summoned NBC security. Any chance of reconciliation ended right there. Once their disagreement crossed from verbal tension into physical confrontation, Johnny made sure Wayne Newton would never be invited back. Dana Carvey, the impression that sealed his fate. Dana Carvey crossed a dangerous line.
It was people having sex in different languages throughout the world.
Like?
Swedish, sure, Irish, I wouldn't that be good now, you little baby? Little bit strong today, dramatically delicious. Japanese, I thought, was the best language for sex. Terse, sharp biting, perfect for sexual expression.
The fallout cost him valuable promotion opportunities for upcoming films. While Carvey believed the impression was a form of homage, Carson saw it as outright disrespect. Repeating a sketch that painted him as outdated right to his face was ultimately unforgivable. Kevin Nealon, one joke too far.
Thank you very much. I really enjoy doing this. It's a lot of fun, You get to travel around a lot. It gets lonely sometimes, though. You go to these little cities and you stay in these hotels and you don't know anybody or anything. I used to call my girlfriend on weekends, but that didn't work out very well. And what they say, calling long distance is the next best thing to being there, right? I say the next best thing to being there is being with someone that looks similar.
One careless joke tied to personal tragedy was enough to erase him from the guest list forever. Yuri Geller, exposed on live television. For the Yuri Geller appearance, Tonight Show staff tightly controlled every prop, ensuring Geller couldn't manipulate anything beforehand. Carson, a devoted fan of magic, watched closely from his desk with visible anticipation. As the segment unfolded, it became painfully clear that nothing was working. Under fair conditions, Geller's famed abilities completely failed. The illusion collapsed in real time. An uneasy silence spread through the studio as the audience realized they were witnessing a full exposure. Carson's excitement vanished, replaced by clear irritation over wasted airtime. No explanation was needed. Geller had discredited himself on national television. It was his first appearance and his last. Howie Mandel, When Gimmicks Kill the Rhythm. Howie Mandel later revealed on his podcast that Carson personally banned him simply because he didn't enjoy his act. The breaking point came during a 1985 episode when Mandel introduced a massive saber-toothed tiger prop. The effort to drag the oversized gimmick on stage consumed most of his allotted time, unraveling the show's carefully planned pacing. Carson watched as the segment collapsed under the weight of an unfunny spectacle. That night marked Mandel's final booking. Johnny valued sharp, efficient comedy that flowed naturally with conversation. Mandel's frantic, prop-driven style clashed completely with that vision. The tension was obvious as the routine relied on spectacle rather than laughs. Once the prop appeared, there was no smooth way to recover. Mandel kept pushing, hoping it would land, but the payoff never came. Carson refused to rescue the moment by pretending it worked. Backstage, it wasn't seen as a bad set, it was viewed as a booking failure. For Johnny, the show's rhythm was sacred, and the couch was never meant to be hijacked by a pointless prop. Charlie Callas, The controversy centered on an alleged clash. Comedian Charlie Callas reportedly found himself banned after a chaotic on-air moment that may have involved physical contact with Johnny Carson during a failed couch appearance. What exactly happened has never been fully confirmed, but several accounts point to improper physical interaction between Callas and Carson during the taping.
No matter the intent, the outcome was the same. Whether it stemmed from pent-up frustration or was simply an unintended bump caused by Callas's frantic slapstick routine, Carson accepted neither explanation. Any breach of personal space or hint of physical aggression violated Carson's strict professional code. Callas was never invited back, joining the short list of guests whose careers on the show ended due to a single reckless moment. Callas built his reputation on extreme physical humor, marked by wild gestures and sound effects. That approach worked well on stage, but it reportedly crossed a line on Carson's couch. Carson was famously protective of his personal space, especially following his earlier clash with Wayne Newton. Even a harmless shove disguised as comedy could activate Carson's zero-tolerance instincts and permanently shut the door. The incident became a cautionary tale about how quickly physical comedy can backfire when it turns physical. Another example was Jerry Lewis, the comic who mistreated a member of Carson's staff. Carson and Lewis once shared genuine mutual admiration, with Lewis stepping in as guest host more than 80 times by mid-1975. That long-standing relationship ended suddenly after Lewis verbally lashed at Don Schiff, the man responsible for Carson's cue cards. On one particular night before hosting duties, Lewis arrived an hour and a half early, carrying a fully typed monologue plus 4 additional pages of tightly packed material. Schiff explained he could prepare the monologue cards, but the extra pages were impossible to handle given the limited time. Lewis erupted, unleashing a tirade of verbal abuse at Schiff in full view of the crew. Once Carson heard what had happened, he cut ties immediately. Crew members later recalled Johnny had absolutely no tolerance for that kind of behavior. He understood The Tonight Show only functioned because of the staff behind the scenes. Without them, there was no show. From that moment forward, Jerry Lewis never appeared again. Another infamous fallout involved Orson Welles and a botched math stunt. The legendary filmmaker attempted to guest host in 1978 and presented a supposed mathematical feat using ping-pong balls printed with 5-digit numbers tossed to the audience. Participants were told to read the numbers aloud, while Welles rapidly calculated the total and wrote the answer on the chalkboard. The stunt collapsed spectacularly when 2 planted audience members mixed up their calculator results and gave the wrong figures. Carson was furious, not because the trick failed, but because Welles knowingly deceived the audience. To Carson, misleading viewers shattered the sacred trust between host and audience, something he valued above everything else. In Carson's eyes, Welles had turned The Tonight Show into a staged hustle without consent. The entire act depended on viewers believing they were watching real brilliance, when it was actually a scripted illusion involving plants. Carson had built his legacy on honesty and direct connection with his audience. Allowing that trust to be exploited on his stage felt like a personal affront to the show's core values. Welles was never invited to guest host again after that humiliating episode. Then there was Joan Rivers, the betrayal that wounded Carson more deeply than any other. Joan wasn't just another comic delivering a quick 5-minute set before moving on. She had risen through the Tonight Show ranks and became one of the rare figures Johnny trusted enough to warm his seat. That trust carried weight, since Carson ran the program like a closed circle, where loyalty meant handling conflicts directly. In 1986, Joan Rivers accepted a Fox deal to host her own late-night series. The real wound wasn't just competition, but how Carson learned about it. What lingered with Johnny was discovering the news through industry publications instead of hearing it from her personally. To him, it felt like betrayal by someone he had championed and shielded. Rivers later said she tried repeatedly to reach him, but was blocked at every turn. Once Johnny felt crossed, intentions no longer mattered. He neither debated nor bargained. He simply cut her out completely, and her name vanished from his show. Although the ban formally ended in 2014 when Jay Leno took over The Tonight Show, Carson never spoke to her again. Lola Falana, the domino fallout. Falana's exclusion stands out because there's no explosive moment to reference. There's no infamous interview or sabotaged segment. Early on, she appeared several times and did exactly what Carson wanted from a guest. She looked polished, performed smoothly, and helped the show flow effortlessly. Then the invitation stopped, and the silence said everything. The reason traced back to Carson's bitter feud with Falana's close friend Wayne Newton. The tension escalated after Newton outmaneuvered Johnny in the Aladdin Routel purchase, followed by a heated office confrontation already noted. The dispute spiraled into press coverage and legal drama. Falana's behavior on air had nothing to do with it. She wasn't punished for anything she did on camera. She became collateral damage in someone else's war. Carson reportedly refused to book anyone closely aligned with Newton while the feud dragged on. It was guilt by association, plain and simple. Falana paid the price for remaining loyal to Newton during his clash with Carson. Johnny's grudges didn't stop with the offender. They spread to anyone connected. What made it especially unfair was Falana's spotless record as a guest. She delivered strong, entertaining performances every time. Her work had zero relevance to the Newton conflict. Carson simply wouldn't separate personal disputes from professional bookings. Being near someone on his blacklist was enough to get you erased. The exclusion lasted for the remainder of Carson's run on The Tonight Show. The Amazing Kreskin, the psychic line in the sand. Like Yuri Geller, the Amazing Kreskin eventually found himself barred from The Tonight Show. The reason stemmed from Johnny's deep understanding of magic, which made him hostile toward performers he believed were deceiving the public for profit. Kreskin appeared, claiming genuine mind-reading abilities and real foresight, presenting them as authentic psychic powers rather than theatrical illusion. Carson viewed this as deliberate deception, both unethical and intellectually dishonest. Once Johnny decided Kreskin wasn't merely an entertainer, but a fraud, the door closed permanently. Having studied magic since childhood, Carson knew the difference between showmanship and exploitation. He respected performers who admitted their acts were skillful tricks, but asserting supernatural abilities to sell books and lecture tours crossed a moral boundary. In Carson's eyes, Kreskin was profiting from people who truly believed he could access their thoughts. Johnny considered that behavior predatory and refused to give it airtime. Yet the situation wasn't entirely straightforward. Unlike Geller, Kreskin often framed his act as mentalism and performance rather than outright supernatural power. That ambiguity is why Carson allowed him on the couch so many times. Whenever Kreskin leaned too hard into "this is real" language, Johnny stiffened and watched closely. He waited for the instant the act stopped being entertainment and became a pitch. Carson enjoyed clever illusions that amazed the audience. What he rejected was dressing tricks up as proof of mystical power meant to change lives if you bought the next product. That's where Carson's tolerance ended. He refused to let his stage become a marketplace for belief manipulation. To Johnny, a magician admits technique, but a psychic claims destiny. And once that line was crossed, the door stayed shut.
So the question remains, was Carson justified in holding on to these grudges, or should he have shown more grace? Was he defending the standards of his show, or simply reacting to bruised pride? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and tell us which guest you believe truly deserved their permanent goodbye. If you enjoyed uncovering these classic Tonight Show controversies, be sure to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories from television history. And don't forget to hit the like button to support the channel.